The arrival of the arrogant. The doors to the rusty comet slid open with a hiss, and the bar fell into an uneasy silence. 5 figures strode inside, towering over the patrons. Drakvar warriors, clad in dark leather and steel, their reptilian hides glinting under the dim neon glow. Their leader, a broad-shouldered brute with jagged facial spines, surveyed the room with the air of a conqueror. His fanged mouth twisted into a sneer. The old bartender, Gideon Holt, barely looked up from where he stood behind the counter, polishing a glass with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who had seen all. The Drakvar were known across the galaxy as warriors, mercenaries, and conquerors. They held no love for humans, viewing them as an upstart species, clever perhaps, but fragile. To them, Earth was just another fledgling world, and its people were little more than scavengers with dreams above their station. The leader, Commander Vrock, stomped toward the bar, his heavy boots leaving faint scratches on the metal floor. He slammed a clawed fist onto the counter. "Human, we require drinks." His voice was deep, carrying the arrogance of one who had never been refused anything in his life. Holt barely reacted. He finished wiping the glass, set it down, and looked up at the Drakvar with a face as worn and lined as old leather. "Got credits?" he asked. The warriors snorted, exchanging amused glances. One of them, a younger, leaner fighter with a scar across his snout, leaned against the counter. "You think we'd drink at a filthy human bar if we couldn't pay?" Holt shrugged. "You'd be surprised how many big, tough warriors try to skip out on their tabs." He gestured toward the menu on the wall. "Pick your poison." Vrock barely glanced at the list before waving a dismissive hand. "Your strongest drink. If human liquor is even worth drinking." The bartender nodded and turned to the shelves behind him, selecting a squat, black bottle with faded gold lettering, Devil's Ember. He poured a thick amber liquid into a set of metal shot glasses and slid them across the bar. The drink's fumes were strong enough to make the nearest patrons wince. The Drakvar snorted in amusement. "This is your strongest," Vrock sneered, picking up the glass. "I was expecting something potent." Holt raised an eyebrow. "That's Earth-brewed, military-grade whiskey. Used to be reserved for commandos on deep space missions. It'll burn all the way down." Vrock grinned, lifted the shot, and downed in one go. The effect was immediate. His throat constricted, his eyes bulged, and he barely suppressed a violent cough. A slow, painful burn spread from his stomach outward, his scaled skin heating as the alcohol hit his bloodstream like a supernova. The other Drakvar watched in fascination as their commander slammed the empty glass onto the counter, his claws digging into the metal. Holt's face remained unreadable, but there was a glint of something in his eyes, something amused. Vrock forced himself to straighten. "Huh." That was, his voice cracked, and he coughed, sending a curl of smoke from his nostrils. "Nothing." "Another." The other warriors laughed and grabbed their own glasses, eager to prove their own resilience. They downed their shots in quick succession, and one by one, they regretted it. The youngest of them, a warrior barely out of his first campaign, choked violently, doubling over as the whiskey hit like a plasma charge. Another's forked tongue flicked out, as if trying to taste the fire still lingering in his mouth. Holt leaned on the bar, watching them with mild curiosity. "Still think human liquor is weak?" Vrock gritted his fangs and growled, slamming his fist onto the counter. "Bah, a trick. You poison your own drinks." Holt chuckled, a dry, low sound like rusted gears turning. "No poison, just real alcohol." The other patrons, a mix of alien species, smirked into their drinks. They had seen this play out before. The Rusty Comet was a human-owned establishment, and more than a few arrogant outsiders had learned the hard way not to underestimate Earth contributions to galactic culture. But the Drakvar weren't just here to drink. They were looking for trouble. One of the younger warriors, still rubbing his burning throat, scanned the bar and smirked. "This place is pathetic," he said loudly, nudging Vrock. "Look at them. Weak. Soft." He pointed at a young human pilot sitting at a nearby table, a kid barely past his teens, wearing the flight jacket of a cargo hauler. "I bet even this one thinks he's a warrior." How sad. The pilot stiffened, but said nothing. Holt stopped wiping his glass. His eyes, once distant and unfocused, locked onto the Drakvar with chilling precision. Vrock grinned, emboldened by his subordinate. He turned to Holt. Tell me, human, have you ever seen real war? The bar fell dead silent. Holt slowly set the glass down. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Not a growl, not a threat, but something worse. A statement. You're awfully brave for someone who's never met a real human soldier. A flicker of uncertainty passed over Vrock's face, but it was quickly replaced with laughter. A soldier? You? You're nothing but an old man pouring drinks. Don't insult real warriors. He reached out and knocked over a bottle from the counter, letting it smash on the floor. The warriors laughed. Holt didn't react. He just exhaled slowly, reaching under the bar. There was a soft click. The doors locked. A mechanical hiss echoed through the room. The neon open sign flickered off. Every patron in the bar froze. Some of the older ones, the ones who knew, scooted their chairs back, away from the Drakvar. Vrock's laughter faded. He looked at the bartender. What did you just do? Holt rolled his shoulders, stretching as if shaking off rust. Then, in a voice calm as the void, he said, I locked the doors. Vrock narrowed his eyes. And why would you do that? Holt's fingers flexed slightly, the way a veteran might before a fight. Because now, I'm going to teach you something about humans. A cold chill settled over the bar. And for the first time since entering, the Drakvar no longer looked amused. The last straw, the silence inside the rusty comet was heavy, like the air before a storm. The neon hum of the bar lights buzzed softly. The locked doors sealed with an audible click. The Drakvar warriors exchanged glances, their previous amusement replaced by something colder. Vrock leaned forward, placing both clawed hands on the counter. His spines bristled slightly, an instinctive reaction to a challenge. You think locking the doors changes anything, old man? His voice had lost some of its arrogance, but not its edge. You're just a bartender. You have no authority here. Holt didn't respond. He reached under the counter and slowly pulled out a metal case, setting it on the bar. He flipped open the lid. Inside, nestled in dark foam, was a worn military badge. The edges were scratched, the engraving faded, but the emblem was unmistakable. A hush fell over the room. One of the alien patrons, a veteran of the Zarnoth rebellions, sucked in a sharp breath. The Black Wolves, he murmured. The younger patrons looked confused, but the older ones, those who had fought in wars before, suddenly seemed uneasy. The Black Wolves were legends, an elite human special forces unit from the Galactic Wars. They were deployed in conflicts so brutal that most species preferred not to discuss them. The few who had survived encounters with them whispered about ghosts in the dark, warriors who didn't just win battles but ended wars. Vrock's smirk faltered. He had heard the name before. A myth, a ghost story. Holt exhaled, closed the case, and set it aside. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and then finally spoke. I spent 30 years fighting in wars you probably read about in tactical briefings. I was there when the Vela front collapsed. I led extraction teams during the siege of Eurota 4, and I was one of the last men to walk out of the ruins of Epsilon Prime. A heavy pause. You think humans are weak? Maybe you're right. Maybe we are soft. Holt met Vrock's gaze, eyes like steel. But when the killing starts, when it's life or death, we don't break. We end things. Vrock's jaw clenched. He wouldn't back down in front of his men. He had to reassert control. Words. He scoffed. Just words. He reached for a bottle behind the bar, intending to smash it over Holt's head. He never got the chance. Holt moved. Not like an old man. Not like a bartender. He caught Vrock's wrist mid-swing, twisting it with a sharp, precise motion. There was a sickening crack as the alien warrior's fingers splayed open involuntarily, the bottle falling harmlessly onto the counter. Vrock snarled in pain, but before he could react, Holt released his grip and drove a flat palm into his chest. It was controlled, not enough to break anything, but enough to send Vrock stumbling back. The bar exploded into motion. Two Drakvar lunged for Holt, but he was already moving. He sidestepped the first attacker, letting the warrior's momentum carry him straight into a bar stool. The second came in swinging, but Holt ducked under the strike and delivered a brutal, piston-like elbow to the warrior's midsection. The Drakvar collapsed, gasping for air. The young warrior, the one who had mocked the human pilot earlier, drew a plasma dagger from his belt. Holt sighed. Bad idea, kid. The moment the alien lunged, Holt shifted his weight, caught the warrior's wrist, and redirected the strike. The blade sank into the counter, embedding deep in the wood. With a twist and a shove, Holt flipped the warrior over the bar. The alien landed hard on the floor, groaning. The last warrior, standing, hesitated. His comrades were all sprawled across the bar, gasping, disarmed, or groaning in pain. Holt adjusted his sleeves. Still think I'm just a bartender? The warrior backed up, then helped one of his fallen comrades to his feet. Brock, still clutching his injured wrist, glared up at Holt. Humiliation burned in his reptilian eyes. You think this is over? He growled. Holt smirked. I don't think. I know. Brock's gaze flickered to the door, still locked. A moment of indecision. Holt leaned forward. Here's the deal, tough guy, he said quietly. You walk out of here, and we forget this happened. Or, he glanced down at the plasma dagger, still embedded in the counter. I finished what I started. A long, tense silence. Brock slowly got to his feet. His warriors followed, still winded. The Drakvar commander didn't meet Holt's eyes. You will regret this, human, he muttered. Holt chuckled. I doubt it. With a final, defeated growl, Vrock gestured for his men to move. Holt pressed a button under the counter, and the doors unlocked with a soft hiss. The Drakvar staggered out, bruised, humiliated, and quiet. As soon as they were gone, the tension in the bar broke. A few patrons exhaled in relief. Some exchanged knowing grins. The young human pilot, still seated near the corner, looked at Holt with wide eyes. You were Black Wolves? He asked, voice hushed with awe. Holt just poured himself another drink. Not anymore. The pilot hesitated. But why didn't you kill them? Holt sipped his whiskey, considering. Then he smirked. Because a real warrior doesn't need to kill to win. The bar erupted into quiet murmurs of respect. As Holt returned to his usual routine, his communicator pinged. He glanced down at the message. It was from an unknown sender. A single line of text. You've earned our respect. Join us for a warrior's feast. Holt chuckled. Guess they learned something tonight. A lesson in fear. The Rusty Comet was back to business as usual, almost. The patrons still exchanged glances, whispering about what had just happened. The old bartender, Gideon Holt, had dismantled a squad of Drakvar warriors like it was just another Tuesday. Holt leaned against the counter, rolling his sore shoulder. He might have been fast, but he wasn't young anymore. The message on his communicator still glowed on the screen. You've earned our respect. Join us for a warrior's feast. A Drakvar invitation. That wasn't something you turned down lightly. Before Holt could decide how he felt about it, the bar doors slammed open. Brock was back, and he hadn't come alone. 6 more Drakvar warriors entered, bigger, heavier, meaner than the ones before. Their armor was reinforced, their weapons visible. The bar fell silent again. The younger patrons tensed, their hands drifting toward concealed weapons. The older patrons, those who had fought in wars before, stayed completely still. They recognized the look in Holt's eyes. Brock stepped forward, flexing his injured wrist. His sneer had hardened into something uglier. You think this is over, human? His voice was quieter now, darker. You humiliated us. That won't stand. Holt sighed. Thought we already settled this. Brock grinned. Oh, we're not here to fight. Not yet. He gestured to the new warriors behind him. These are my kin. You heard my warriors? Fine. That means you challenged our clan. And the clan doesn't take insults lightly. Holt eyed the new arrivals. Their movements were different, more disciplined. These weren't young brutes looking for trouble. These were trained killers. Let me guess, Holt said. You want a duel? A trial by combat. Brock's grin widened. Not quite. We want to know what makes humans so dangerous. He stepped closer, voice lowering. What makes you so scary, old man? Holt's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. The regular patrons recognized it immediately. The The Drakvar had just made a mistake. Holt's voice was quiet. You want to know why humans are scary? Rock nodded. All right. Holt moved. Faster than an old man should. Faster than they expected. He killed the lights. The bar plunged into darkness. The Drakvar barely had time to react before something crashed in the shadows. Someone grunted. The sound of rushed movement filled the air. Then silence. The warriors tensed, gripping their weapons. A voice whispered from the dark. You know why humans are dangerous? Holt's voice echoed from somewhere in the bar. Impossible to pin down. A Drakvar whirled, his breathing sharp. You fight with claws and muscle. A rustle to the left. Another warrior turned, scanning wildly. We fight with patience. A thud. One of the warriors dropped to the floor with a muffled gasp. You fight in formations. A metallic click, a weapon being disarmed. Another warrior grunted as his rifle was yanked from his grip. We fight from the shadows. Another thud. Another grunt. Another warrior down. The remaining Drakvar spun in panic, their own fear turning against them. You think we're weak because we don't have fangs or claws. A warrior lashed out wildly, striking only air. But humans don't hunt with strength. A whisper directly behind one of them. We hunt with fear. Rock tried to speak, but something slammed into his gut, knocking the air from his lungs. He crumpled hard, gasping for breath. Then, the lights flickered back on. The scene was brutal. For Drakvar warriors lay unconscious on the floor. Two more were on their knees, shaking, their weapons gone. And Holt? Holt stood right behind Rock, hands in his pockets. Calm, unshaken. Rock gasped, coughing. He looked up at Holt, his confidence shattered. Holt crouched down, locking eyes with him. You want to know what makes humans scary? Holt said softly. Rock swallowed hard, unable to answer. Holt leaned in. It's not our weapons. A pause. It's not our size. Another pause. It's that when the fight starts, we don't just attack. Holt's voice dropped to a whisper. We make sure you never sleep the same way again. Rock flinched. Holt straightened, stepping away. The other patrons watched in silence, letting the moment sink in. Rock's warriors, those who were still conscious, scrambled to their feet. They didn't try to fight. They didn't even meet Holt's gaze. They just helped their fallen kin and backed toward the door. Holt watched them go, his expression unreadable. Rock hesitated at the threshold, his pride and his survival instincts warring inside him. Finally, he exhaled. Then, without looking back, he muttered, I understand now. And with that, the Drakvar were gone. The bar stayed silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension eased. The hum of conversation returned. Someone let out a low whistle of respect. Holt went back behind the bar, grabbing a fresh glass. He poured himself a drink. The young human pilot from earlier was still there, staring. That was... The pilot struggled to find words. Holt sipped his drink. A lesson. The pilot frowned. A lesson in what? Holt smirked. Fear. The rusty comet carried on. Just another night in a dangerous galaxy. But the Drakvar? They would never forget what happened here. A newfound respect. The rusty comet had returned to its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. The neon lights flickered, glasses clinked, and conversations hummed once more. But an undercurrent of change lingered in the air, as if the galaxy itself had shifted in some small but undeniable way. The Drakvar had come here arrogant, mocking, and sure of their dominance. They had left humbled. Holt wiped down the bar with steady hands, his expression unreadable. He wasn't the type to gloat. He had taught a lesson, nothing more. Whether the Drakvar learned from it was up to them. He glanced at his communicator, still displaying the message from earlier. You've earned our respect. Join us for a warrior's feast. It had been sent before the night's events had unfolded. Holt had assumed it was some kind of ploy, a way for Vrock to save face or lure him into another fight. But now he wasn't so sure. The door to the bar hissed open again. For a moment, the room tensed, expecting more trouble. But instead of another squad of Drakvar brutes, a single warrior stepped inside. Holt recognized him immediately. This one was older, scarred but not broken. His dark red armor bore markings of a clan chieftain. His weapons were sheathed, and his posture held neither arrogance nor hostility. The bar watched in silence as the Drakvar approached the counter. He stopped in front of Holt and bowed his head slightly. Holt set his rag down. "Something I can help you with?" The warrior exhaled through his nose. "My name is Chieftain Korikvar. I am Vrock's father." A ripple of interest passed through the patrons. The father of the warrior Holt had humiliated. This could go sideways fast. But Korik wasn't here for revenge. "My son," he said, "was a fool. But not anymore." Holt raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Korik nodded. "He came to me after what happened here. He did not make excuses. He did not hide his shame. He admitted he was bested. That is not something our kind does easily." A beat of silence. Korik continued, his voice steady. "You showed him something he had never faced before. Something no training could prepare him for. He met Holt's gaze, and he wishes to honor that." Holt said nothing, waiting. Korik took something from his belt, a small metal insignia, etched with the sigil of the Var clan. He set on the bar. "A gift," Korik said, "a sign of respect. You are now recognized as an honored outsider of the Drakvar." The bar murmured. That was no small thing. The Drakvar were a warrior race, proud and insular. Outsiders rarely earned their respect. Holt studied the insignia, then looked back at Korik. "And what does that mean exactly?" Korik smiled, sharp but sincere. "It means that no Drakvar warrior will ever challenge you again, unless you wish it." Holt smirked. "Not much for duels these days." Korik chuckled. "So I gathered." Holt picked up the insignia, running a thumb over its surface. He considered his next words carefully. "You know," he said slowly, "your son's a good fighter. Strong, fast, but he's still young. Arrogance is natural at that age." Korik nodded. Indeed, he thought strength alone made him superior. "And now?" Korik's expression softened, just slightly. Now, he understands that true warriors do not fight for dominance. They fight for purpose. A beat. Holt smiled. "Good. Then he'll do just fine." Korik exhaled, something like gratitude in his posture. Then, to Holt's mild surprise, the chieftain reached into his belt again and withdrew a small flask. He placed it next to the insignia. "A second gift," Korik said. "Drakvar blood wine. Only shared with those we call kin." Holt picked it up, inspecting the heavy metal casing. "Strong stuff." Korik grinned. "Wouldn't be much of a drink if it wasn't." Holt considered for a moment, then grabbed 2 glasses from beneath the counter. He uncapped the flask and poured 2 careful measures of the thick, dark liquid. The bar watched in silence as the human and the Drakvar chieftain each took a glass. Holt raised his. To understanding. Korik's grin widened. To warriors. They drank. The bar erupted into cheers. Hours later, as the celebration died down, Holt found himself alone at the bar again, staring at the insignia. He had spent most of his life at war. He had fought and killed, survived battles that turned planets into graveyards. And yet, in this quiet corner of the galaxy, he had earned something far rarer than victory. Respect. Not through bloodshed, not through dominance, but through wisdom, through restraint, through the lesson he had taught. Holt exhaled, tucked the insignia into his pocket, and poured himself one last drink. Tomorrow, the galaxy would move on. New fights, new stories. But tonight, an old warrior sat in his bar, knowing that somewhere out there a young Drakvar warrior was thinking, not about conquest, not about proving himself, but about what it truly meant to be strong. And that, Holt decided, was worth drinking to.